أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلوات وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآله وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. عظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم. Very happy to see all of your faces after a very long absence, maybe around about 5 months maybe. And we're all happy to be back and of course continue on with participating in programs physically. It would take a little bit of time for us to get back to how we were in socializing and adjusting ourselves to interacting with other people outside the virtual world and physically. A lot of us have become very, very comfortable in the confines of our houses and behind screens, and maybe that comfort could, for some people, turn into a habit. And that's a very, very bad thing. Al-insan madaniyun bil-taba'. A human being is by nature social. And therefore, we need to interact and socialize with other people. Of course, on a quality level, we need to make sure that those who we do socialize with are people of virtue and people who we would learn from and benefit from, because it's very easy for bad habits to brush onto us, brush off of other people onto us, and therefore we need to always be selective in that area as well. I'm sure all of you know that since the beginning of the coronavirus and the lockdowns and things like that, there's been a very high increase in the level of problems in mental health and issues like anxiety or depression, or even a high rise in suicide and suicide attempts as well. And that's all because of people not being able to be with other individuals. And that in itself is very, very important. When we somehow isolate ourselves and, not be with other people, learning life skills and how to interact and sharing our worries and concerns and things like that, that could lead to a spike in certain things that we really try to avoid. And so that's why Islam emphasizes very much on jama'ah, on congregation, on us congregating, on being with other people. It's very easy for me or you to stay home, to avoid people, to, if we want to learn something or do something, we turn on YouTube these days. But even before, when people who were maybe we wouldn't call them antisocial, but we would say that they didn't really like to interact with other people, introverts and whatnot. We can see that even in prior times, when there wasn't any such thing as internet or YouTube, there were still people like that. But now these things have become easier for people to avoid other individuals. One of the things that we always come across with people who say, "Shilli bhal waj'at ras." Why am I, dragging myself in all these problems and mashakil and fitnas and dramas and issues like that? If I stay by myself and if I avoid all these people, then I'm not going to have any of these dramas. Yeah, that's probably a way of you minimizing any kind of issues or dramas in your life. But at the same time, is that really what your purpose is in life? Is that really what you want to achieve and accomplish? Especially when you see, from what we're going to be talking about tonight, in regards to the life of Imam al-Askari alayhi salam, we can see that even our Imams had a really easy option of saying, hey, by the way, look, I'm just going to close my door and mali dakhal bin nas, ma'aliya, I've got nothing to do with any of you, and story's over. Sometimes even it could be as simple, it could be as easy as shaking someone's hand, which was the case of Imam Hussein doing bay'ah, even deep inside if he didn't really intend it or mean it, but at least on the outside people would see him shaking hands with Yazid and pledging allegiance to the governor of Medina on behalf of Yazid. Story's over, no bloodshed, no Karbala, no nothing, everyone can continue on. Is that really what it is? Is that what our goal and objective is? Ihna as human beings, as religious people, as devout people, we really want to make sure that we have a life-changing experience towards the best in order for us to achieve something in our lives. And we also want to have an impact on other people around us as well. And that's why the Quran says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةً, that the believers are brethren. We have to have that brotherhood, sisterhood. We have to make sure that we are networking with each other. And we can only do that if it's in person. There's a hadith that says, تَصَافَحُوا تَتَسَاقَطْ ذُنُوبُكُمْ. Shake hands and your sins will start to fall away. Just by shaking hands, when you're shaking hands with another fellow mu'min. Let me ask you a question. Nowadays, do we not see a lot of people, especially from the younger generation, not having social skills? ما يعرفون شلون يحجون. They don't know how to talk. They don't know how to express themselves. They don't know how to do something as simple as ضيف, as serve tea, or as communicating verbally. And people will say, oh, well, I prefer to type the messages more than I am in person. And even when you do come across someone and you're sitting down with someone, what are they doing? Most of the time looking at updates on their looking at updates on their social media and things like that. Again, that's not Ali. Why don't you sit down on the kursi like everyone else? Isn't it better? Thank you. Checking on updates on social media and things like that. Something that I always say to people around me, I say, look at your handwriting, how bad your handwriting is. Because a lot of people, Hassan was laughing when I said that, because a lot of people are so used to typing, right? A lot of people are so used to typing. So what's the point in learning how to write nice with handwriting if all you're going to be doing is typing? You might come back and say, oh, we have to live with the times and we have to do this and we have to do that. Yeah, that's fine. No one's saying that you need to learn different calligraphy styles, even though calligraphy is a beautiful skill. It's a beautiful art, calligraphy. And that's why, when you see, these Arabic scripts, how beautiful they are. You will never see an Arabic script written in, for example, bad handwriting. Arabic script, especially when writing things like the Quran or like dua or letters or things like that, was beautiful. And along with that, nice decorations and motifs and flowers. I'm sure you've all seen them, haven't you? So a lot of people spent a lot of effort in learning the skill of calligraphy. Now you probably say, okay, well, it's all been replaced with technology. So there are certain things that you are able to replace with technology, but there are other things that you'll never be able to replace with anything. Most important of them is what I am talking about, and that is interaction. Exiting your comfort zone and interacting with other people. Maybe you might not need it, but maybe you being there physically with someone, reaching out to them unintentionally. It's not, you don't have something in the back of your mind that you want to save this person from, for example, some issues that they might be facing in their life, or mental health issues or things like that. That might be not be the case. But maybe by you doing what you're doing and reaching out to them and speaking to them and asking how they are and just being there for them, even if it's not talking about nothing about religion and just playing Nintendo or whatnot, right? You're probably saving them. You're probably giving them relief that they need. So we should never underestimate the power of interaction with other people and participating in physical programs as well, especially, when it comes to your fellow brothers and sisters. Today, Friday, was the martyrdom anniversary of Al-Imam Hassan Al-Mujtaba alayhi salam, our 11th Imam. And for this reason, I thought it be appropriate for us to give a brief overview on the life of Imam Al-Hasan Al-Askari alayhi salam. And I'm sure you all know he lived a very, very short life. And his imamah was even shorter. And of course, there are a lot of things that he went through in that short life of his, but extremely, extremely important in the long run. And its effect stays with us here today, especially in our understanding of the importance of imamah, and also when it comes to our 12th Imam, Sahib al-Asri wal-Zaman, al-Imam al-Mahdi, Ajjalallah ta'ala farajuhu al-Sharif, because he was the father of Imam al-Hujjah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. While you're reading everything that I have here, one of the interesting things when it does come to Imam al-Askari alayhi salam is that he had only one child. He had only one son. Of course, one of the reasons for this was the level of persecution that the Alawis or the Hashimis, the members of Ahlul Bayt, were going through. As you know, Imam al-Askari's father, whose name was Imam Ali al-Hadi, thank you, was Imam Ali al-Hadi. He was living in al-Madinah al-Munawwara. Even though Imam Ali al-Hadi's father, whose name was Imam Muhammad al-Jawad, was in Baghdad, and he was, of course, martyred in Baghdad, and he was buried in Baghdad. And that's why he was buried along with his father, Imam Musa al-Kadhim alayhi salam. And that's why in Baghdad they call it either al-Jawadain or al-Kadhimain, right? And this is where Imam al-Askari was born, in al-Madinah al-Munawwara, because Imam al-Hadi returned back to Medina. A lot of our Imams, when they felt that level of suffering and difficulty and things like that, one of the things that they did was they returned back to Medina to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. This is exactly, for example, this is exactly what Imam al-Sajjad did. This is what some of our other Imams alayhim salam did. Even with the Shahada of Imam al-Ridha alayhi salam, his son also, and everything else. I think I said something wrong with the Imams, didn't I? Because I skipped Imam al-Rida. So Imam al-Jawad, I said Imam Jawad and his father, didn't I? Yeah, sorry about that. Imam al-Jawad and his grandfather, Imam al-Kadhim, they are buried where? In Baghdad. How many Imams are buried in Iraq? Quickly. 6. How many Imams are buried in Al-Madinah al-Munawwara? 6. Sorry, Ma'sumin. Sorry. You got me there, Ali. How many Ma'sumin are buried in Medina? 6. How many Imams? 4. So you have Rasulullah, Fatimah al-Zahra, and Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, Imam Ali al-Sajjad, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salam. All of them are in Medina. Then in Iraq, you have Imam Ali, you have Imam Hussein, you have Imam Kadhim, you have Imam Al-Jawad, you have Imam Al-Hadi, you have Imam Al-Askari. Right? Then we have one more left. Where is he? Gharib al-Ghuraba, Abu al-Hasan al-Sultan, Ali ibn Musa al-Rida, buried in Khurasan. And so, of course, with all this persecution that they were facing and the difficulties that they had, even though they were keeping everything low-key, they were not in any way confrontational. They were avoiding all the dramas and the problems and the issues by not, being vocal about, yes, I'm the Imam, you have to give me back the Khilafah, you have to do this, you have to do that. No, when they had the chance, they did. But in most cases, right, they were just going with the flow, as we can say. Why is that? Because they knew that they were a threat. And the more they, for example, were to push towards those ways, the more difficult the situation would be for them. The sad issue that is that their very presence was a threat for the Abbasi Khulafa. They didn't like them. They didn't like anyone from Bani Hashim. And that's why in Baghdad, with the Shahada of Imam al-Jawad, the people of Baghdad, they rose up. They had an uprising, right? And they were, as they say, rioting. So what did the Abbasi Khulafa have to do? They had to leave. When they left, they headed north towards Surruman Ra'a, towards Samurra, and they created a military force. They imported non-locals, right? They imported non-locals because a non-local, right? Someone who isn't a local is always going to be more aggressive and ruthless to those who are the locals. Why? They don't know you. They're mercenaries, as they say, right? So that's why they brought people from surrounding areas, from Turkey and other places, the Atrak and things like that. Why? Because they say, I don't know you, I don't know your Arab tribal ways, I don't know who you're related to, right? But if it was a local, people, first of all, wouldn't take them seriously. And secondly, they'll always try to find weak ways and say, okay, I'm going to tell your uncle, Ammak Fulan, about you and things like that. It's like here with the Musalla, when it's Muharram time, right? Who's the security that they usually use? They get other people as security. Why? Because they say, oh, well, if Peter and Bob is doing the security, they're not going to make any complaints about them. But if it's someone like Ali or Muhammad or something, they'll say, oh, no, I'm going to double park and into Ma'alik. Nothing to do with you. What? You start a fight, Good. So, Samurra is 100 and, what did I write? 125 kilometers north of Baghdad. Who's been to Samarra? Put your hand up. 1, 2. Alhamdulillah. You know, we went to Samarra in probably the most difficult of times, the most serious of times, really, really dangerous of times. We went to Samarra. Anyway, so they created a military force and they called it Al-Askar, and that's what it means in Arabic, isn't it? And of course, Imam Al-Askari and Imam Al-Hadi were in Al-Madinah, and they were summoned by force to live under house arrest in this military fort. And that's why they are called Al-Askariyain, Al-Askari Al-Hasan, Imam Hasan Al-Askari. Right? And so what we can see is that even though they were living under harsh conditions and under house arrest, and they were frequently imprisoned and going to jail, in and out of jail, a lot of interesting things happened at that time as well. But one of the things that the Abbasids wanted to do was to cut off the network system that the A'imma alayhim salam made. Imam Al-Hadi, then Imam Al-Askari, what they were doing was they were working on two levels. One was trying to counter all of the fitnas and the problems of other people having wrong ideology, having things or ideas that were against the 12 Shi'i way. You had different groups popping up here and there, claiming to be imams, claiming to be representatives of the Prophet. Look how many you had. You had the Zaydis, you had the Fatahis, you had the Ismailis, you had the Waqifis. During the time after the Shahada of Imam Askari, you had the Ja'fari, and we're going to speak about that as well. All these issues that are happening, this guy saying he's the Imam, that guy saying he's the Imam, that guy saying he's the Imam, right? And all this happening all at once. And on top of that, we can see that they need to prepare the minds of the people of the Shia, that you need to know how to conduct yourself as a community when the 12th Imam goes into the minor ghaiba and then into the major ghaiba. One way that they did this was to prepare the mindset of the people, was to go into short intervals of absence. Like Imam Al-Hadi or Imam Al-Askari, they would refuse or avoid interacting with people for months on end and say, during this time, I have my wakil who's going to be dealing with my affairs. Any issue you have, you refer to this person, right? And that's why here it says in this particular, sorry, that was the second one. Anyway, let's read this. This is an example of the level of persecution that they were going through by the name of a prison ward by the name of Autamish or Barmish, and he was extremely hostile to Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and hated Ali ibn Abi Talib, and of course he was the one that was doing a lot of these things as far as pressuring the imams as well. One of the things that someone had said by the name of Al-Saymari, he said, رَأَيْتُ خَطَّ أَبِي Muhammad, I saw the script, a letter from Imam al-Askari once he had left the prison. And on that letter it was written, يريدون ليطفئوا نور الله بأفواههم والله متم نوره ولو كره الكافرون, that they want to extinguish the light of God, but the light of God will continue to radiate as long as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, even if the disbelievers don't like that. This is referring to them wanting to crack down on the Shia, and at the same time them not being able to. You know, one of the places that you'll see right next to the holy shrine of Imamain al-Askariyain is the palace of the Abbasids. And there's a minaret. I don't know if you've seen that minaret called the Malwiya. That minaret, it said, was, of course, for the Abbasids. They wanted to, recite adhan. Of course, they acted in the most pious of ways. When you go to Damascus, the most beautiful of masajid is Masjid Bani Umayyah. So don't think that the evil tyrants are not going to build the nicest of mosques. You've got the Emirates. Aren't they working hand in hand with the oppressive state of Israel? And they're having regular meetings, and there's a direct flight apparently between Dubai and Israel. The largest masjid, I think, in the world is the masjid in Abu Dhabi, and the most expensive as well. So don't have this impression that, someone who builds masjids are by default going to be pious and religious and things like that. Even the Quran mentions Masjid Dhirar, the harmful mosque that the Prophet ordered that it be destroyed. Why? Because it was the munafiqeen that built it, right? And so not everything that was done should be taken on face value. You have to look in depth about the motive, the intention, and everything else around it. That's why al-mu'min kayyisun fatin, a believer is alert, aware, always vigilant, knowing the deceptive thoughts and the deceptive ideas. And that's why if you were during the time of the Imam and someone else popped up and does some Hermione Gariosa, what do they say? What's that Harry Potter thing? Huh? Yeah, thank you. Does magic stuff and can do things and can make you fly and things like that. You're going to straight away say, oh, wow, you're the Imam? That's what they were doing. That's what they were doing. They were very, very deceptive. They were masters of deception. And unfortunately, the naive, the gullible, people who weren't firmly rooted in their aqidah, they gave in and they became Fatahis and Zaydis and Ismailis and Waqifis and whatnot. And so when it comes to, that way of seeing them, one of the things that is said in history that the Alawis, the Shia at that time, there were so many massacres and killings that occurred, they didn't know where to put their bodies, so they started putting them in the walls of the masajid and the minaret. And that's why for Shia, you'll never see a Shi'i going towards the Malwiya and the Manara. They say it's a place of bad omen. It's a place of bad omen. As for the Khulafa that were during the time of the Imam of Imam al-Askari, they were al-Mu'taz, and then al-Muhtadi, and then al-Mu'tamid. We've spoken before, if you remember, about why were they giving themselves these kind of names, very similar to the names of A'immatu Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, al-Hadi, al-Mahdi, al-Mu'taz, this, that. Why? Because they wanted to somehow give themselves this a noble name of piety and things like that. Al-Mu'taz was the one responsible for the poisoning of Imam al-Hadi, and al-Mu'tamid al-Abbasi was the one responsible for the poisoning of Imam al-Askari alayhi salam. I mentioned here the representatives because they're very important, their names here, especially like, for example, As-Saffar. As-Saffar, he is a famous narrator, and one of his books still exists called Basairul Darajat. The next time you come across someone who says, oh, where is the information that you have in regards to the imams and things like that, there are books that date all the way back to our Imam alayhim salam. Persecution. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Persecution, of course, happened with, and we just mentioned in detail about this, monitoring the Shia. But the Shia were really, really desperate in wanting to see the Imam. And so sometimes they would sit on the pathways between the jail and the masjid just so they can see the Imam alayhi salam. One time, the Imam wrote a secret letter to his Shia and said, don't come out. Because the Abbasids, they found out, they knew the plot, and they said, anyone who's out there on this day, when we bring the Imam out, they're going to be killed. And so the Imam, beforehand, he had sent this letter. عن علي بن أبي جعفر الحلبي قال اجتمعنا بالعسكر. We gathered around the fort وترصدنا لأبي محمد عليه السلام, and we were sitting around waiting for the Imam. يوم ركوبه فخرج توقيعه. So a letter signed by him came out. أن لا يسلمنا علي أحد ولا يشير إلي بيده. No one should greet me, no one should point to me, no one should look towards me. ولا يومأ أحدكم فإنكم لا تأمنون على أنفسكم. Because you're not going to be saved if that was going to happen. That was the level of persecution that they were going through. And that's why the wilada, the birth of Imam al-Hujjah, was secret, top secret. Only the elites of the elite of the Imam's companions knew. And they didn't know when, they didn't know where. Even Sayyidah Narjis alayhi salam, the signs of her pregnancy that a woman usually experiences with her tummy getting large was not happening with Sayyidah Narjis alayhi salam. Exactly the same as the story of which prophet? Musa alayhi salam. The birth of Prophet Musa was also concealed because Fir'aun was ripping open the stomachs of the women in Misr because he knew of the story of his empire falling at the hands of someone who is going to be born. And this is exactly what they knew. They knew that someone was going to be birthed, someone was going to be born. He will be the 12th from the lineage of Rasulullah, and his name will be exact same name as Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, and he will يملأ الأرض قسطا وعدلا بعدما ملئت ظلما وجورا. And that's why they wanted to kill him. And that's why only an elite of the elite of Imam al-Askari's companions knew about his birth and also saw him as well during that period of time, from the time of his birth until the time of his minor ghaiba, and then from the time of his minor ghaiba until the time of the commencing of his major ghaiba, only his wukala, the sufara, saw him. One of the issues that that the Shia had was someone by the name of Ja'far. Now, in history, he is referred to as Ja'farul Kadhab, because they wanted to distinguish between him and Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam. And also, it is said that he was very corrupt, immoral, and he claimed imamah, and he claimed to be the 12th Imam. He also said that Imam al-Askari didn't have any children. Even that one child that you all assume he had, he didn't have. And that's why they refer to him as Ja'farul Kadhab. Ja'farul Kadhab. Now, you're going to ask me, and by the way, this morning when I was reading about him, Ja'far al-Kadhab, they call him Abul Banin, because apparently he had up to 120 sons. Now, I don't know whether or not that can be authenticated, but that's what was said. He was younger than Imam al-Askari. Question, why, how could someone be that close to the Imam, and the son of an Imam, the brother of an Imam, but deviate away from the path and become corrupt? How? The answer that's given in reference to this is because of rufaqa us-su, suhbat us-su, bad companionship, bad friends, bad influence. It doesn't matter how good you are, how good your parents are, how noble your family may be. If you hang around with the wrong crowd, you're going to be like that. And they, as we said, it's natural. People's bad habits brush off onto other people. If you're interacting with this person, and it might be in behavior, it might be in ideology and thought as well. You know, some brothers, some sisters come up with the most kufri of ideas. Just a while ago, I was talking about, a topic with someone about the topic of abortion, and that in Islam, once there is a fetus growing in a woman's stomach, it is considered as a human being. And aborting it, terminating that pregnancy, is considered not only haram, a sin, but also murder in Islam. And then they turned around and said, my body, what do they say? My body, my choice. What about this? What about that? These kind of arguments that are usually mentioned by SJ, what do they call them? SWJs, SJWs, social justice warriors. And, they get into that vibe of, we need to be free of our choices, and we can't, ask someone what happens if this or what happens. And alhamdulillah, with Islam, it's covered all of these things. But even though Islam has covered all of these things, if you have become so brainwashed in this modern westernized way of thinking, it doesn't matter what Islam says, and even if you still claim to be a Muslim, you won't be able to detach it from you. And what's that? Where does that come from? That comes from your wrong friendship that you have with certain individuals. It's not just a matter of suluk and behavior and that. No, it's a matter of ideology as well. And that's what happened with Ja'far al-Kadhab on every level. Now, of course, we need to also mention that towards the end, even though many people started to follow him and they became referred to as al-Ja'fariyah, right? Many people started to follow him, but it is said that he later on repented, the same way as the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam repented, and that's why they refer to him as Ja'farul Tawwab and not Ja'farul Kadhab. One of the things that I'm going to finish this off very quickly. One of the things that Imam al-Askari alayhi salam did, as we had mentioned, was lay down the grounds for the authority of ulama. For the authority of ulama, that if you have issues, you have concerns, you have things, you don't have access to the imam, even though the imam might still be alive, even though the imam might be in Medina or in Samarra or somewhere, you don't have access to the imam. What do? You're living in Ray, you're living in Qom, you're living in Basra, you're living in Baghdad, you're living in Medina, you're living in Khurasan. You're away from the imam. There's no such thing as sending an email to your imam at that time. What do? You refer back to the authority, and that is al-ulama, the ruwatu hadithina. There's a long detail about this, but this is one of the things, one of the accomplishments of the Imam al-Askari alayhi salam said some beautiful ahadith. I'm just running out of time. Beautiful ahadith. This beautiful hadith is really interesting, and it relates to Ja'far that story of Ja'far al-Kadhab. And he says, Imam al-Askari says, Ju'ilat al-khaba'ith. What does it say? Ju'ilat al-khaba'ith. All of the, what's khaba'ith? Evil things, bad things, have all been placed in one house. Carry on. Al-Kidhb. And how do you enter into this house of evil? Al-Kidhb. Al-Kidhb, as they say, miftah al-khaba'ith. Kidhb, lying, is a key to all other sins. And that's why we need to be very, very careful and to always be honest, even if it's against us. Being honest all the time is really, really important. One of the sad things that also occurred, because our Imam alayhim salam were always mazlumeen, even after their lives they continued to be mazlumeen, was the mal'uneen, Dawa'ish, the Al-Qaeda, whatever their cursed evil title or name may be, because of their hatred to true Islam. Because of their hatred to true Islam, their hatred towards Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, they'll never be comfortable by seeing something that reminds them of A'immatu Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. These same people in Daesh and things like that are around now, they would be the same people that were killing us Shia during that time. And if they had the chance, and they do have the chance, they would continue on doing so. And that's what they did. What's a building going to do? And as you all know, Samarra, the haram of Imam al-Askari, is surrounded by Sunnis. Samarra is, majority of them are Sunnis as well. So it's not an issue of, people usually just go there, do ziyarah, and go back to their houses, don't they? But they didn't want it. And that's why they came and they destroyed the Qubba Sharifa, they destroyed the Holy Dome the first time, but the minarets were staying. And then they said, that's not enough, we've got to get rid of it all. They came back the next year and they put explosives on the minarets and they blew up the minarets as well. Ala la'natullahi alayhim. And we will finish off with asking Al-Hajj Abu Ali, Hajj, to who wants to recite dua, ziyarah of Imam al-Askari? Where is he? Where? How far? No. No. Can you see Ali? Yeah, let's start reading then. Yeah. Let's stand up, everyone.
ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا ولي الله وابن أوليائه. السلام عليك يا حجة الله وابن حجته. السلام عليك يا صفي الله وابن أصفيائه. السلام عليك يا خليفة الله وابن خلفائه وأبا خليفته. السلام عليك يا ابن خاتم النبيين. السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوصيين. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا ابن الأئمة الهادين. السلام عليك يا ابن الأوصياء الراشدين. السلام عليك يا عصمة المتقين. السلام عليك يا إمام الفائزين. السلام عليك يا ركن المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فرج الملهوفين. السلام عليك يا وارث الأنبياء المنتجبين. السلام عليك يا خازن علم وصي رسول الله. السلام عليك أيها الداعي بحكم الله. السلام عليك أيها الناطق بكتاب الله. السلام عليك يا حجة الحجج. السلام عليك يا هادي الأمم. السلام عليك يا ولي النعم. السلام عليك يا عيبة العلم. السلام عليك يا سفينة الحلم. السلام عليك يا أبا الإمام المنتظر الظاهر للعاقل حجته والثابتة في اليقين معرفته المحتجب عن أعين الظالمين والمغيب عن دولة الفاسقين والمعيد ربنا به الإسلام جديدا بعد الانطماس والقرآن غضا بعد الاندراس. أشهد يا مولاي أنك أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر ودعوت إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة وعبدت الله مخلصا حتى أتاك اليقين. أسأل الله بالشأن الذي لكم عنده أن يتقبل زيارتي لكم ويشكر سعيي إليكم ويستجيب دعائي بكم ويجعلني من أنصار الحق وأتباعه وأشياعه ومواليه ومحبيه. السلام عليك ورحمة الله وبركاته.
أحسنتم. رزقنا الله وإياكم زيارته في الدنيا وشفاعته في الآخرة، وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات بالخصوص مرحومين شيعة أمير المؤمنين من ليس له ذاكر، رحم الله من يقرأ السورة المباركة الفاتحة قبلها الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.